The Galactic Council had been meeting for 600 years before they found Earth. They expected ruins. What they found was Orion. He was standing in the airlock before the docking seals had even finished pressurizing, arms crossed, wearing something that the Veth xenobiologist later described in her report as fabric woven from the hide of a dead animal, which he appeared to have chosen for warmth rather than ceremony. Senior Envoy Celera pressed 2 fingers against her secondary eyelid membrane, the reflex her species used when encountering something that violated expectation. The human was early. No delegation had ever been early. She had read the briefings. All of them. 300 pages assembled by the Council's finest xenographic minds. And what she remembered most was a footnote on page 2. Humans are one of the only species in recorded space to have domesticated their own apex predators. She had read it. She had not understood it. She understood it now, watching Orion unfold himself from the airlock hatch with the casual ease of something that had never, in its evolutionary history, needed to be small. Envoy Celera. He said her name correctly, on the first try, in a dialect she hadn't transmitted to his ship. I've been looking forward to this. The council chamber smelled of ethery incense, a compound engineered to calm negotiation stress across 19 different species' nervous systems. Orion walked in and inhaled like it was coffee. Celera had hosted 311 first contact negotiations. She had never seen a species representative enjoy the calming compound. She had never seen a species representative glance at the 7 council members arranged in a deliberate display of authority, an arc of towering bodies representing 600 years of civilizational supremacy, and smile. Not the diplomatic smile. Not the smile of a creature performing confidence. The smile of something that recognized the arrangement and found it familiar. Before we begin, she said, because the silence was starting to feel like something she'd lost control of, I want to offer context that may be unfamiliar. The Galactic Council represents 407 civilizations across 32 parsecs, a combined age of roughly 40,000 standard years, and treaty law dating back to the Keth Accords. Orion pulled out a chair, one of the enormous Veth Council chairs, designed for a species with 3 additional thoracic segments, and sat in it sideways, one arm hooked over the back. We've been listening to your transmissions for about a century. You're very thorough. Celera's membrane flicked again. They had been listening. The xenographic briefing had noted, in that same footnote, humans evolved in an environment where most large fauna could kill them. They are one of the few apex-adjacent species to reach spaceflight without ever having been, at any point in their evolutionary history, at the top of their food chain. They are, uniquely, prey animals who decided not to be. She thought about that footnote. She looked at Orion. Prey animals. Decided not to be. I want to be direct, she said. She always said this. She had never, before today, actually meant it. The Council is offering Earth membership on a provisional basis. Observed status. Non-voting for the first 30 cycles. 60 years. Yes. And in exchange? Access to galactic infrastructure. Medical knowledge. Shared defensive technology. Orion was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Celera had cataloged the silence thresholds of 407 species. For seconds in a human was. She checked her notes. For seconds in a human was thinking. Not stalling. Not performing consideration. Actually thinking. No, he said. The chamber went the kind of silent that had a temperature. Third seat Yemrin, whose species communicated partially through bioluminescent rippling, flickered yellow, the color of extreme diplomatic alarm. You're refusing, Celera started. Not refusing. Orion leaned forward, and something in the room shifted in a way that had nothing to do with him moving. We want voting rights in year 1. We want seat access on the Infrastructure Committee, the Medical Ethics Board, and the Defensive Treaty Council. And we want the Keth Accords renegotiated. The Keth Accords are the foundation of. They're 600 years old, and they protect the species that wrote them. We didn't write them. Celera stared at him. He met it. Not the stare of a creature performing bravado. Not a bluff. Something quieter than that, and therefore much worse. A stare that said, I have been the smaller thing in the room my entire evolutionary history, and I never once looked away. She called a recess. In the antechamber, behind a closed blast door, she pulled up the briefing file and went back to that footnote and read the rest of it, the part she had skimmed. It is worth noting that humans were not, at any point, the fastest, the strongest, the most venomous, or the most armored species in their biome. They had no natural weapons of significance. Their young are helpless for years. Their sensory range is notably limited. They became apex through persistence, cooperation, and a documented psychological inability to accept the situation they were born into. Recommend treating all human negotiations as inherently non-standard. They do not recognize the categories that typically structure first contact. They tend to behave as though the outcome is negotiable. In our experience, it is with them. That is the concern. She went back into the chamber. Orion had found the recessed refreshment station, designed for species with fluid sac intake organs, and had jury-rigged a cup out of his palm and was drinking the ethery ceremonial water out of his own hand like that was a solution rather than an affront. He looked up. "The Kethochords," she said. "Yeah. Which sections?" "Not a concession. An opening." He set down his improvised cup. He was smiling again. "The real one. The one with no diplomacy in it." "All of them," he said. "But we can start with 3. Later, much later, when the preliminary frameworks had been filed and Orion's shuttle had disengaged from the docking ring, and Celera was alone in the chamber with the smell of ethery incense and 600 years of certainty quietly rearranging itself, she pulled up the full xenographic file. The last page. A note from the lead researcher, appended informally, outside the official summary. "I asked one of our Earthside contacts why humans evolved the way they did. Why they kept going when every environmental pressure suggested they shouldn't. She said, we didn't have any other options. So we made some. I have been doing this work for 40 years. I have never been afraid of a first contact. I want to revise that." Somewhere in the docking ring, a shuttle climbed out of the station's gravity shadow and found open space. Orion didn't look back. He never did.